If you want to participate, contact me at ordinarywomenpodcast@gmail.com. I'm sure you have great projects to brag about. You can also follow me and message me on Instagram at ordinarywomenpodcast, on Twitter at ordinarywomenpc, or on Facebook on the page Ordinary Women. Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Ordinary Women. Hi Daniela, how are you?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm doing well.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited to have you here today. Can you start by giving us a quick introduction of yourself, please?
My name is Daniela Felletti. So, being a Brazilian with indigenous background, I really like to introduce myself as a woman of color to emphasize my story. I come from Brazil, but I also have origin from Italy. My father was from Italy, so I have this mixed heritage, which I may tell you more later. But yeah, basically, I currently live in Europe, based in France, and I am a business entrepreneur. I work as a consultant in diversity, equity, and inclusion. I help companies and leaders create a culture of belonging, working with focus on inclusive leadership, inclusive recruitment, how to eradicate bias from the workplace.
Cool, sounds amazing. And can you tell us something unusual about yourself?
Maybe something that people don't know about me often, because I work remotely, so the fact that I live very close to the sea and I don't really need to be in a big city. I travel when I need. I am a lecturer, so when I need, I go where I have to go. But yeah, I have this little place where I hide, where there's a small town, and with the sea just by my side.
That sounds amazing. And since obviously here we talk a lot about being a woman, I like to start by asking, was there a moment or an event in your life when you realized that you are a woman?
I think I would like to share, not specifically how I realized that I was a woman, but more about the awaken related to how society perceive us human as individuals and how we should actually behave, how we are treated, how society expects us to behave as well. And of course, we create a mirror, and then we went up also expecting ourselves and being hard on ourselves and from our peers where we relate themselves into this gender. It was when I was in Madrid in 2013. I read this book, Lenin, Woman, Work and the Will to Lead. It's written by Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook. She's the COO. When I read this book, I was actually looking for inspiration related to management. I was in the phase of self-education in everything related to management, leadership, and behavior, human behavior, all the neuroscience around. It was more for personal reasons, also because professionally I was feeling a bit undervalued. Like for almost all my life, I've been working for companies, corporates, and at this point I was still working for a company. And reading this book, which is a book she wrote to actually help women think about why woman is not only human, but society open up the conversation, the dialogue, why we are not advancing in leadership. She brought some stories, not only about her own story, but of people around her, with data as well, and practical tips for how to negotiate, how to advance in your career. And it helped me actually understand I was not alone in something that for a while many times I would think it's my problem only. And then I ended up connecting to a global movement, which is actually something that I'm very, very happy to be part of. And I ended up creating my own circle here in Bordeaux. It's a global movement, so I'm the founder of Lenin Network Bordeaux. I created it in 2015 when I moved to France. And we started 3 people, and now I have a network where I have over 300 members registered and 8 actively meeting every month. An amazing team of volunteers. We're 8 women helping each other bring this support to our community. And we have this mission of the inclusion of the intersection of women in the workplace. And this is the global mission. Locally, we are really with the purpose of educating our members, and we organize like conference and everything. It's just amazing how, from a book, it transformed something. So I became like really obsessed of helping other women waking up in these terms. Yeah, I think it's more about the awakening related to the perception of women in society, how social norms dictated my life for a while. And after this, I think slowly I started understanding, and then today I can say it's no longer this way. I feel more in control of my own destiny.
That's super cool. That's such a great thing to have that awakening and to be able to work on that. Like you directly took action. That's amazing. Would you say that it's because you've lived in a few different countries, right? Did you feel a country in which it was very different from another, or what's your experience on that?
Oh my God, yeah. It's always new experience, new culture, new language. Coming from Brazil, I had already this little knowledge of my Italian is my second language. So I had already some basic of the life of Italian people, but living there was different. I can say that living in Italy, in Spain, England, and France, of course, Europe differs a lot from Brazil in terms of security. It's one of the reasons I really feel comfortable living in Europe for the safety. We can say it depends of the level of safety someone imagine. If you live in a big city in Brazil, you need to be attentive, careful in the streets, not going out alone at night. Many things that I maybe, or at least where I've been living here in Europe, I didn't experience this fear. So mostly of my experience in Europe was quite well in terms of safety. But then I can say, since my work is very related to discrimination, right? Because I fight discrimination, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was also one of the reasons that has been driving me in this work is that I know how a woman of color and foreigner, the need to fit in each culture and also lose a little bit of yourself, right? Of your identity, because we have the system that you still use this way of we need to integrate people instead of include them. I like to say that we should talk about added cultures, added these values now. I bring, for me, I have 5 countries in my bag. I have 5 different languages, and each language for me is a different personality because you change a little bit your voice, you change your expressions, also the way you communicate must be adapted a little bit. But then you have this uniqueness of, your accent that is there somewhere. And in the beginning, when I was, especially in Italy, because it was the first country I really lived for a while after Brazil, the exigence with the language I would be very, very severe with myself. So I wanted to be perfect because I didn't want people to comment about the way I speak or correct me. I really would do a lot of effort to be perfect. And it was tiring. It was so tiring. I like to speak correctly, of course, but when we speak many languages, it's just almost impossible to avoid. Even in my own language now, I can make some mistakes, or even say some word in a different way, thinking I'm saying something in Portuguese, but maybe it's Italian. So it can happen. So today I actually don't have this pressure on my back, because I just realized I like my accent, I like the way I speak. I don't like to make mistakes, of course, but it doesn't block me of continuing talking and expressing myself. So I think this is one point of difference of in language, like the weight of having to be perfect and fitting perfectly in a culture that it's not yours, that you are learning. I think that it would be much more easy for everyone, even for people who is local, right? If we had this mentality of openness and discovery. I'm here to discover your culture and you can discover mine. And we have this exploration, and I will add culture to my own. I won't let it go. I felt like I had to let go, for example, my Brazilian essence for a while because of stereotypes as well. The way, as soon you say you are Brazilian, people would mention samba or carnival stuff, or trans people, for example, in Italy, because we have many transgender people who comes from Brazil to Italy, probably because in Brazil we are in the country that kills the most transgender people. But then there is all this mix, and then you feel like, should I do something to belong? So you try to fit in, especially when you are younger, right? And you are not yet owning your own story. And as I was in my 20s.
Thank you. That was like super interesting. I mean, that is super interesting. And moving on a little bit, did you grow up with any female role model?
For me, my role models, probably I didn't really even knew it, they were role models at the moment, but I always wanted to be like my sisters, my oldest ones, in special Patricia, which is the oldest. We shared the room. I just wanted to be like her. I felt like she was brave and beautiful, probably because we were little and you search for. I think the old sisters are a little like your role model, maybe. I don't know, my impression. But apart from that, I will tell you, I had a big lack of role models growing up, like in especially being a woman at home. We are 7, and I'm the one with the darkest skin, for example. I have indigenous heritage. It's a bit far, far, far away, so I don't have any record from the tribe my mom's family belonged, but also because of racism history, I believe I was not so interested in learning more until now. When I was young, I suffered a lot of bullying growing up. So because of my skin color, I was being called India, which is beautiful, but for me, the way they would call me, it was more pejorative. So I grew up thinking that having this skin color is not beautiful. I took a long time to really accept my own color and learn actually that it's beautiful as a heritage as well, right? In Brazil was the last country to abolish slavery. It happened in 1888, 20 or more years before they abolished the slavery. The government locally started actually a big project on whitening the country. And why I tell you that? Because it impacted my life in 1981. If you look at my birth certificate, it says I'm white, because at this period, like, they would ask you the color of the baby. It's funny because my birth certificate says I'm white. So I would have this conflict of, on the paper, I would fill forms and have to say I'm white. Because of my Italian heritage, it shows the superiority of race, colonization. Then, in the other side, with family and school, I would suffer bullying and, would feel confused. Also, as I mentioned, when you fill forms, we had still many questions. What's your color? When I was teenager, and I remember I would say, "What's my color, Dad?" And I remember he said, "Well, but you were white, you were Italian." And of course, it comes from what we learned, what he learned it as well, that if you were half European, you are white. Doesn't matter what you see in the mirror. It was quite confusing. And growing up, it changed because I started connecting to my to the history and also, everything related to racism. Now, more than ever, I really own my story and my heritage, and I think we need to learn more about that and bring the conversation into the top, because what's happening in the world right now, it calls us to how we need to accept the past, the history, to correct the present, then we can have a better future. It's an example is what happens in the Ukraine now. We have racism also for refugees who are not Ukrainians, right? People of color, Arabic also origins, they are having hard time in how they are seen as refugee. Like let's say there is no second class refugee. We are not born refugee, become because of events that happens in the country, right? But it's still, it shows how media reacted as well. I don't know if you saw some of the news in the last months. And now it's a little bit calmed down, but it's still happening. It reminds us what we have been hiding because of taboo. So Europe right now, they're starting to talk about intersectionality, which is the plurality of diversity, and brings the conversation around racism more open. And it's still hard because people are not used to talk about it, and they avoid the difficult conversations, and it's very delicate. After the Second World War, it was basically became like, no way, we don't talk about it anymore. The word should not even be mentioned. The fact that we need to mention it is to remember that racism exists. So in order to eliminate it, we need to accept that we all have the bias behind. That's part of also what brought me here today. I am with my work. So, and the lack of role models when you are a woman of color or you have intersectionalities, like more you have difference, less representation you find. So it's really hard to find your own representations, like as role models, women in a special for me. I had many male figures, but yeah, as a young child, I can mention only my sisters. My mom, today I can say she's my role model, but when I was young, I was not very connected to her because she was very busy, and I think with the religion, she's very Catholic. So I recently connected much more to my mom.
Wow, yeah, that must be incredibly difficult. And yeah, I'm glad that today you're able to connect more with your mom with that. And yeah, today, like aside from your mom, did you manage to find other role models or to identify or at least to find people who you feel closer to and who maybe share the same experiences and with whom you can talk about it?
Oh, absolutely. After my awakening, as I mentioned before, I really have been connecting to many women, and I created my own community. So I think all the women I've been in contact with from my network in a global level, but also locally, they all inspire me. We learn from each other a lot. I believe it's very powerful. Of course, Sheryl Sandberg, she became one of my big role models for a while, but now I can also say I love Shimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She's a writer. I don't know if you know this woman.
Yeah, I love her. She's amazing.
So yeah, this is one of my favorite writers right now. I've been not looking for, but inspiring myself everywhere. I look for role models all the time, in all ways, and I try to diversify also. Then I don't get stuck with one kind of thinking. So it's a opening, blowing your mind when you connect to different people, and completely also out of what we would even expect, if you think about people with disability, which I prefer say super ability, because the who lives in a world that was not built for them, it's actually a superpower to be there every day, right? I would really go broaden right now. I find inspiration everywhere. My team as well of volunteers, they're all amazing women. They're entrepreneurs, they are women who work in companies, but we are all committed to the cause of helping women feel empowered and also educate society in locally about bias and how to fight it. And my clients, when I work with men as well. It's not, my clients are not mostly mainly women, but I find also, I can say I still get inspired by men, but I also have a broadened and more diversified list of people that inspire me. Every person that I work with, I try to find inspiration. I could make you a big list.
That's so cool. And that, yeah, it's so important. I'm so glad that, yeah, you managed to find some more inspirations or like people to whom you can relate more today. So we talked a lot about other people, but I'd like to talk more about you and a project or achievement that you want to more focus on in this podcast. So what do you want to talk about?
I think I can talk about my own business, which after someone who worked most of her life for companies, when I decided to start my business, it was not easy, but and that's why I'm very proud of that I put myself in it, and I started it in a country that it's not mine, in a language that when I started it, it was still not perfect. So it's it's something that I'm very proud of, like being today entrepreneur and committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion, consulting, and education.
That's super cool. So what exactly is it?
Well, to give you some context, when I started my business, being in France for a year, I was still improving my French. I had a hard time to find a job, and I decided to just start my business because I had a friend and this woman who was starting also her own business in Spain. And she was like, hey, why not work together? Like, I need help. She was a headhunter, and I worked in headhunting period of my life. I knew the business. I'm very good in research and connecting people. So I was like, what? Why not? I'm living in France, and I can start something abroad, which is perfect because it's easier for me speaking 5 languages, right? And I started like this for a year. And the thing is, the headhunting business is not exactly inclusive, let's say. When you talk about headhunting, it's about, I believe there is a system that is improving right now. But when I was working, I think it's still improving now, but it was even worse at the moment. What companies ask you, you feel obligated to find them and to follow their guidelines, which are not really very ethical very often. So I felt not very connected to my values. My integrity was being compromised. Of course, most of companies does because we normalize it, some of these behaviors. So they don't think it's wrong. It's just crazy because the law says something, but we do something different. But anyway, it's hard to prove and to discuss, and you need money, you need to work, so you end up not being able to do so much change. So I decided to change my business plan completely. I felt like I needed to add more my values first in my business. So I reviewed everything. I was already educating myself in terms of diversity and inclusion. I was very interested in this topic. So since 2013, I was already reading everything, joining conference and doing trainings, course. It was first for my own personal interest, and at some point I was like, hey, wait a minute, I could actually transform it in my business, right? Add it to my business, because at some point I was more happy doing my volunteer work than my work. It wasn't something right. So I deciding to include diversity, equity, and inclusion in headhunting, for example. I invented inclusive headhunting terminology for my own mental health. I would challenge my partners and the client, and I will let them know that I will challenge their bias and my bias as well. So it's some way to protect myself from compromising my integrity. Doesn't mean it'll be perfect, because bias, it's complicated to fight, but at least I know I can call out, and I know I can also protect myself in my agreements and say, hey, I work this way, so if we don't comply both, it's not possible. So there is also many ways we can protect ourselves and choose to work with clients that are actually engaged and committed to change and improve, at least, right? To listen, open to listen, basically learn. I started doing consulting in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I do diagnose, I help understand where's the gap, and then create a strategy to bring this sense of belonging in the company, how to eradicate bias and open up dialogues, having difficult conversations. When you work in diversity, equity, and inclusion, one characteristic you really need to have a quality is being able to facilitate difficult conversations and challenge the status quo. You really need to understand the past and accept the existence. Then we can actually correct, right, what's racism, why there is sexism in the company. If we don't really accept it, it's hard to change. What is lacking in companies often is also this, say, that having this voice, feel confident to talk about it. So it's something that I'm proud of, that today I feel comfortable in any uncomfortable situations. I actually am the one starting the conversation. Leaders, I would help them challenge their perceptions respectfully, of course. Doing this work, I developed a lot of active listening. I am focused, in fact, on helping leaders develop their inclusive leadership approach. In another aspect, I also bring my multiculturality and intersectionality approach into everything I do related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. As I mentioned also before about inclusive recruitment, it's about not only training recruiters, but I also give consulting service. It means when we talk about recruitment and how to be inclusive, it's about retention first before attraction. How are you retaining? What's happening in your culture that why people are leaving? The great resignation. So I'm bringing this changing of mindset as well. Let's think about diversity, equity, and inclusion as something that will bring innovation to your company, because we still have the mentality of being a charity thing. So we really need to focus on new. So today I do all this consulting, helping challenge perceptions. I really focus on awakening perceptions and bringing the sustainable approach as well, long term. Like, it's a continuous learning. It's a journey. I really enjoy doing trainings and working with companies, but I am also a lecturer, because I think we need also to commit with the future leaders. So working with masters and MBA students, I designed 4 courses in Bordeaux for 2 top schools in these topics, like management and equality approach, inclusive recruitment, inclusive leadership, but also international career management. When I talk about international career management, by the way, I also help my clients and students challenge their bias behind career change or career development, because if we learn about bias and in an early stage or any stage, it becomes a powerful way of bringing more confidence in your approach, because we are facing discrimination, but we don't know why, so we don't know how to answer. So more we learn, more we connect to our values, and wait a minute, this is not what I want. Like, this is not the kind of leadership I want. So why I'm selling myself to this company? So it's I will promote myself to companies that are actually committed to what I'm looking for. And I will also learn the bias I have in the way I search for a job. For example, there are many bias behind the way we are trained to look for a job. So we putting ourselves in a submission position, like you're needy. So the company has the control of the interview, what they're offering you. So in especially when you are minority, you really have a lack of self-confidence to negotiate and be straightforward with what you want. So it's sometimes it's because we need money, of course, it can happen, but it's important to be conscious. Am I accepting it because now I really need it, but I'm trying to balance my how I compromise my integrity in some other way? By the way, there's a very good book about that. It's called Sellout from Zheng and Inge Hansen. They talk about maintaining your integrity in the age of compromise. It's fantastic. I really recommend. But yeah, it's one of the things I do. I went way out of what I was telling you. But yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, and finally, so because of all this, what I've been doing, I also became a speaker. So I give conference talks, and what I like is that I feel as well, I'm also a bit in more control. I decided I don't give talk to any company or any situation just to be visible. No, I want to work with companies that are actually using this talk to some end that will be continuous, and how is what you're doing with the stock after, right? And it's not a marketing thing. One example is International Women's Day, right? The rights from March. It was a month that many companies came to me, but the first thing I would ask, guys, it's great that you want to organize a talk, but can we talk about what's happening, what strategies you have, what's the goal of doing this, what's coming next? Because giving a talk of an hour, you can give it, you can get the money and can just leave, and they'll be happy they just celebrated International Women's Day. But for me, it's not it's about impact. So if I bring my voice, I want it to be meaningful. So as a speaker, I think it's very important to be clear that we need to be impactful with any service we offer. In my case, as a diversity, equity, and inclusion professional, as a diversity, equity, and inclusion speaker, I would actually reframe it every time I am contacted before I jump into any proposal or collaboration. I really need to understand their goals, their actions, and be sure that it's not only a marketing thing, that it's punctual just to say they are doing something. Diversity washing and etc.
Yeah, completely. Unfortunately, so many companies do it, but it sounds like you're making an amazing job at calling people out. That's super cool. What's some type of reactions that you've received so far?
It's a bit different when they contacted me, for example, in January and February. I think 15 to 20 companies contacted me for the International Women's Day. And I'll tell you just a few signed. Why? Because the first thing I ask is, it's not that I point out something straight away. I just ask them, can we talk? Because I really need to know more about your initiatives, to understand your inclusive strategy, and then see how my talk can be more impactful for you. So sometimes it's because they don't have budget. So it means there is no a real program putting in place, because if you don't have budget, it means it's lacking of investment, and also the mindset of diversity, equity, and inclusion being a priority. So from there, I see already. Second, many times it's because now we had a boom of employee resource group being created everywhere. And many times the leaders from these groups, they are volunteers, employees. And in companies, not all of them, but many companies, they are actually they let them alone a little bit with very short resource, like very low resource in terms of money or also knowledge, right? They have the diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals sometimes, but they're not 100% involved because they have so many other things to think about. So it's missing also the implication from the leadership. So I try to identify where is it lacking or not. And when I have the call, for example, I had this company in Italy that contacted me last year, and he told me it was the first time they wanted to organize this talk. They wanted 30 minutes of talk about women, just to celebrate, maybe talk about bias, etc. And when I asked them about, it's the first time, but so what's the strategy behind it? What are you doing with this later? Then the person who contacted me, he was like, oh, that's a very good question, because we don't have any strategy and we don't have anyone really in charge of it. It was my idea because I thought we needed to do something, because it's a very male industry. And I asked if he would like me to talk to, if it was possible, right? And maybe to talk to the leadership. And it was not possible. He was very, he felt very ashamed and say, oh, yeah, I think it's very hard to convince right now. And I don't think it will. So he tried to put through the HR. The person who contacted me, by the way, was in charge of communication of the company. And he put me through to HR and mentioned that I may want to talk to the leadership. Basically, at the end, they had no very good budget. And also, they just told me, for now, we are letting it go. I want to work with companies that are committed, so I'm not giving my voice in any situation. I told them, when you're ready to have a strategy, you can be at the beginning, right? Maybe if you didn't do anything yet, but to give a talk, I need to know what you're doing next. It could be a kickoff of something, but in this case, for example, it was not possible. It was not right to keep it going. And but I can give you a very good example of a company that I felt like was committed. I gave this talk last March. It's a company in the civil engineering industry. I really love it. I enjoyed working with them because the people who contacted me, they were very committed in making change. And they were also very transparent. We are still in the beginning. They had many initiatives already put in place, but they know they are still in the beginning because it's a journey. And the first thing they told me, we want something impactful. How can you help us? It was completely different from other contacts where I have to really insist to the company that it needs to be impactful and it needs to be connected to something meaningful. They were already thinking about that. So they came to me and just we brainstormed and we had an amazing connection. They included me in everything, in every single step, and they gave me also the freedom to tell my story, because so many companies may be afraid of me talking about racism. Some countries, for example, Italy would be, and because my story comes with that. So and it's important that it's one of the main things that opened the conversation. So I felt included, and I really loved the approach of they had. Like, my talk was followed by a roundtable, a panel with leaders from many parts of the world. I had 1,300 participants in this talk from Europe and India. And after that, also, I got the feedback. They gave me even a letter signed from the company thanking me as a speaker for the impact, and gave me some feedback of participants. So this is the kind of client I really would like to work often. I had other great clients as well. But I would say this was special also because of this openness and inclusiveness in every single step and the way we work together. And I feel like many companies are waking up. So it's a way of filtering also with who we want to work with, what kind of impact you want to create. It's not easy, I would say. It's not easy because sometimes we have a business, so it's not always easy because of lack of understanding. But it's getting better since last year. Even the mentality, I think it's improving. So I feel I have to do less effort in the starting the conversation. At least they come to me more often than I go find them. But it's I think it's, to answer your question, the reactions can be very different from one to another. Sometimes they just disappear. They get a bit shocked when it disappears. It means sometimes not because they don't want to, but the person who is contacting you is not the right person, because they don't have power of decision. So this is the thing that doesn't help, right? If I don't have the contact with the leadership, it means it's something wrong, and it's a red alert for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's good challenges to face, but that you like managed your way around it. That's very cool. And you sound like so passionate and proud of yourself. That's amazing. Yeah, such a good initiative.
Yeah, I feel like it's you feel more satisfied doing your work. I think when you can keep your integrity first. It's not easy because integrity, we will always be compromised. We are compromising our integrity all the time because of external things that we can't control. But learning to recognize it and how to make the most to put it first in some way, or at least a little bit. It's a way to feel more connected and proud of the work we do. I think in any business, in any entrepreneurship idea you have, or anything you are starting, it's important to think about it and consider this as a point to put first. How I keep my integrity in the age of compromise.
Yeah, definitely. That's so inspiring, though, that, yeah, you managed to do that and to challenge people who need to be challenged. That's, yeah, super amazing and inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I think we're going to conclude on this. Is there anything that we didn't talk about during the podcast and you'd like to mention now?
I just think what you're doing is really great, giving human voice. So thank you, first of all, for also giving space to my story to be heard. And yeah, I think we need more of this kind of initiative. We need more role models and from ordinary women.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot. Thank you so much for for joining me today and for sharing some bits of your stories with me. That was so interesting and inspiring to listen to you. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lucy. It was my pleasure.
And as usual in this podcast, the guest gets the very last word. So the mic is yours.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you again, Lucy, for having me here. And yeah, let's keep sharing our stories. And when we own our story, we become also in control of how we are perceived and how we ourselves want to be perceived. We also can inspire other women and youngers. So let's keep sharing.